Greetings and a very big welcome. We're in the spring equinox, and I have to tell you, this has been some amazing energy all during the first 8 days of April. Today being the 9th day of April, it's just amazing. So I want to take a moment to say welcome. You're in the zone. It's called the Biz Info Zone, and you're in the Biz Info Zone show. My name is V. Lynn Hawkins. I'm your host. I'm the founder and dean of the P3 Academy of Social Entrepreneurship. And my goal, my heart's desire, is to help you, the savvy social entrepreneur, to do more, to express your purpose, plan your next moves, jump into implementation, action, and take your business and your family and your life into the realm of prosperity. And if you're already there, I'm saying yes, there's farther to go. So thanks for joining us today. Thanks for hanging out with us. My guest and I are so happy to see you, and I'm so happy to see her. Got Dr. MONIKAH OGANDO in the house today, and let me just tell you a little bit about her, because she is doing some amazing things in the world, and that's what social entrepreneurship is all about. She's helping to teach and spread the word about story leverage and what it means to you and to me and to our businesses. And while she's over there shuffling papers, I want you to know that she's an author, an executive business mentor, a speaker, a trainer, and she's co-CEO of the company CEO Mastery, and shares her Thrive philosophy, the story leverage psychology, and she ties it all up in a what I call doing business as unusual way, because the usual way is shifting, and if it's shifting to anything, it's got to be called unusual. And you know, I've been called some things before. Unusual has been one of them. But I know that in order to get unusual results in your business and unusually positive results in your life, you got to do things differently at times. That's called unusual. And so with business being done in this newly defined unusual way, it really brings us into the space of conscious entrepreneur. And it brings a few things to light, one of which is how important your story is, where you are in your story, how you use your story, how you perceive your story, how emotionally attached you are to your story of the past, to your story of the present, or your story of the future. And I remember one day Dr. MONIKAH and I were talking, and she was like, Lynn, who would you rather be, Shakespeare or Juliette? And I thought, didn't take long, but Shakespeare, man, I want to write the thing. And she was like, well, that's exactly what we can do with our lives and our businesses. So I want to ask you in our audience, what's your story with business? Look at your current reality, and you know, while you even are accepting responsibility for it, are you earning the revenue that you want? Are you having the ideal clients to show up to you, where you've got waiting lists developing for people that you want to work with or that want to work with you? Are you having to figure out new programs and opportunities so that you can work with these people who are finding you? Because it is about the attractor factor. And I hope that you've got a pen and paper, because Dr. MONIKAH has this way of bringing all of this stuff to the table, and if you're not ready, I don't want you to miss it. Of course, you can look at the replay. That's one of the good things. But I really want you to be in a place of openness and receiving, allowing the information that you need to come to you right here, right now. And I want to say, hi, MONIKAH. Welcome to the show.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Lynn. I'm glad to be here. You're going to have to be patient with me because my throat is a little dry. I've been talking nonstop. It's been a speaking week for me, so it's a little raw. So I may have to mute myself so I can cough to the side and whatnot. So just giving you the disclaimer now.
Well, we're here for you. We're sending you some.
But I got my water, my CEO Mastery water.
Hello. I like that. So the energy that we're sending you as a collective is just going to help that to just, yes, even
I receive
out
it.
so that flow is uninterrupted
There you
and
go.
beautiful. So where do we begin? Tell us, what is story leverage? What is it? Where did it come from? Whose is it? Why is it important? Story leverage.
Well, people have been communicating important information, values, history, learning, education, etc. That is one of the most primitive and long-lasting ways that human beings learn from each other is by telling each other stories. Now, the science of studying story isn't new. I mean, you could see people coming up now talk about story selling, story branding, story this, story that. Everybody's got their own take on story and their philosophy, etc. But the studying how we communicate values and instruct each other isn't new. We've always had the mechanism of story. Excuse me. The position of story leverage, however, is that your story is not an indictment. Your story isn't a precursor of your destiny. It's just kind of like the weather report, you know, it's what you came with, it's what the stars are looking like, you know, like do you need a raincoat? Do you need an umbrella? Do you need some boots? Do you need a scarf? What do you need to get out there and be comfortable and do your work and be effective? And so that's the whole point of story leverage, is that we take the common principles of storytelling with branding, and you know, most of us have heard of Joseph Campbell and the power of myth, and there's a running mythology outline, the hero's journey, that is universal. It applies to everyone. You see the raw ingredients in all of our movies, all of our books, all of our of our fiction books, right? Our heroes always follow that particular journey. And so how that's relevant in business is that you want to get clear on what your hero's journey is, but also you want to get clear on what your customer's hero's journey is, because you're going to want to insert yourself into their story. A lot of times what we do is, you know, we have this hero mythology about ourselves, and the customer's like a prop in our own story. And I'm exhorting you, I am imploring you to twist that around, to shift it around on its head, so that you become intensely, intimately familiar with your customer's hero's journey, and then insert yourself into their story. That's how you're going to be effective. That's how you're going to be welcomed. And it's also how you're going to make the most money, is when they can see how you can fit into their journey to take them along the path. Does that make sense?
It does. It really does. I love the way that you coined that. Even, you know, being able to visualize what you said. You have your story, you have your customer's story, and inserting yourself as appropriate into your customer's story, making their story the more important story. You give yourself the best of all worlds, making your story have a different impact than it just being your story, making your story inserted into theirs, showing the value of their story, and probably even showing them how much you can help them
That's exactly right.
to the revenue. Exactly. So how did you get started on this journey of doing this work and impacting entrepreneurs the way that you are right now?
I started out, my first career out of college was as a financial planner. And almost everybody that I had on my roster, of my client portfolio, was an entrepreneur. They were small business owners. They owned and ran their own companies. I didn't have trust fund babies. I didn't have somebody that lucked out and got a really good divorce jackpot. You know, it wasn't like that. These were people that, you know, were building their own wealth, you know, from the inside out. And so I noticed that a lot of the issues that I was having with attracting, engaging, and retaining my clients were very different than what maybe another broker was having, because they dealt with people who were looking at their, you know, 40-year career inside of a job and facing retirement, and their priorities and their risk assessment. All of that is very different. And so this was around the time of the internet bust in the early 2000s. And how many of us know that just because the market fluctuates doesn't mean your sales quota does, right? So I had to come up with a way to continue to attract and engage and retain my clients and my ideal prospects. And that later on turned into a program that I sold to my employer and licensed to them for many, many years. And then they hired me as a consultant to come and train their salespeople to handle the methodology that I had come up with. And really, that methodology was my notes of what was working for me, what wasn't working, and how I got the results that I got. So it was important for me to always put myself in my customer's shoes, because that's the way they say yes, it's the way that they cut the check, it's the way that we continue that relationship very profitably. Fast forward to 2008, and I was awarded with Inc. 500 as one of the fastest growing companies in the United States, which is a huge feat, except that 2008 was the most horrific, financially disastrous year of my adult life. And so I'm getting all these accolades, and I'm getting all this, oh, congratulations, and you're on top of the world. And then, when the Inc. 500 list comes out, all these other people want to do business with you because they know that you're doing well. And it just fueled the imposter syndrome for me. It was like, if these people only knew how much money I've lost in the last 6 months alone, etc., right? And feeling like, looking back on it now, I didn't really have to start over, but it was feeling like I had to start from scratch. And so for me, the work that I do with entrepreneurs isn't just textbook theory. It's not just about the latest, fad or strategy that became popular. It's because I've been in the trenches. I didn't go to business coaching school. I was coaching businesses. That's how I became a business coach, right? And so for me, it is important that people realize, and this is something that I don't hear people talk about, that anything that we create as a human being, this is your creation, so it's made in your image and likeness. It works and it functions like you. Just like our children look like us, And so your business is a reflection and an extension of you, and it works like you do. So, we sometimes try to compare somebody else's adulthood to our childhood, for example. Your business may just be in its infancy stage, what I call the startup phase. And so you're comparing yourself to somebody else who's more established, who maybe already has a very clear brand, et cetera, and it causes that hesitation, it causes that doubt and self-questioning. And when people finally get clear about, there's, just like a story has an arc, your business also has an arc. And sometimes you may go through that arc in a day. Sometimes you go through it in several years. But when you understand the movement, then you can pace yourself. So those 4 stages are: the infancy and childhood is the startup phase of your company. It's when, just like an infant, you have to pay constant attention to it. You have to be constantly feeding it. You have to be changing the diapers when it poops because it doesn't do that by itself. So you have to clean up stuff and you have to set up structures. And then from infancy and childhood, you move to adolescence, which is, in the business world, I call it scaffolding. If you've ever seen, construction areas where they're putting up buildings and they have these scaffolding on the outside of the buildings, it's because the building isn't strong enough yet to start to stand on its own. Right. They've set up some foundations, but it still needs some scaffolding. And you even see that with plants. When you're trying to make a plant grow tall, you put some wire around it so that it can hang on to the wire and develop its own spine, so to speak. So you do the same thing with your business when you set up systems and structures so that it can stand on its own. And then once you move from adolescence or scaffolding to adulthood, or what I call the pinnacle stage of your business, it can stand on its own. It has employees, it has systems, it has structures. You can kind of like hang back. This is the equivalent of, how turbulent it is when you're first taking off on an airplane and then you reach cruising altitude. So it's like that. It's like, okay, you've got an established brand, you've got your customers, you're making good money, and you have a nice profit margin, etc. So it's, you feel like you got it together, like an adult. I'm grown, I could do this, and and then you have old age, or what I call in the business phase, legacy. And old age isn't necessarily just about dying. Some people think that that's just the automatic, right? But from a business standpoint, it could be just a reinvention. You know, you could be selling your company, going public, rebranding, taking a new level, you know, and going through those 4 stages over again, just at a different level, right? And so when you understand what phase of business you're in, you can plan accordingly and you can pace yourself. You know that you're in the startup phase, just like an infant. You know, my nephew just turned 1, right? And he's just now starting to chew solid foods because he's got a couple of teeth in there. so, so he's like, okay, now I can do rice. But guess what? 6 months ago, he couldn't do rice. And there was nothing wrong with him. There was nothing wrong with his digestive system. It just wasn't time, you know? So when you know that about your business, then you're like, okay, you can just pace yourself and just take the steps that you need to take. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I'm so excited to hear that because, as you mentioned with the baby, it's also about being in right relationship with someone because the baby needs someone in relationship with them in order to change those diapers and, you know, interpret the crying that means I'm hungry and things like that. And so really understanding those stages and applying them to business is novel. I love it. I really do. It's a great and easy way. And I want to just say welcome to everybody out there who's joined us. There are a couple of comments out here that I want to just read for us. Hi, Cynthia. Cynthia Gardner-O'Neill is in the audience. And she says, relationships are all about having an experience to express our stories into the world. Thanks for sharing your story, both of us, and transforming lives. We are kind of awesome, I think. Thanks, Cynthia.
High five, Cynthia.
And Josie James is in the audience, and she says she recalls 2008 and what a shift it was for her. She says she's so interested in how she dug herself out of the trenches. And she's hanging on to your every word. So thanks. And
no pressure, though.
Yeah. Well, you know, the stages that you're talking about, it made me think of something that I also teach about moving from a certain plateau to the next plateau to the next plateau, kind of what the Bible calls from glory to glory to glory. It's the next stage, and it's the growth process. And it made me think about, God, what did it make me think about? I forgot that fast. But just that whole growth process. Oh, I know what it was. It was at every stage when you reach that point where you know you've jumped up to that next stage. For me, I really look at it, at first it didn't even faze me as something to celebrate. But like birthdays, it really should be something to celebrate. And by celebrate, I don't mean like the whole, you know, fireworks and stuff, but definitely the recognition like you would with milestone goals. And I know what it brought me to. It was about thriving. And that thrive being something that you can recognize you're moving towards higher thrive, but at each level of stepping up. That's a point of thriving, right?
Well, and this is something that a lot of people, again, something else that people don't talk about or recognize, is that when you're planting a seed, it normally has to go underground where it's dark and cold and damp. And it doesn't look very pleasant or pretty. So people think that there's something wrong because it's cold, damp, and uncomfortable. But it's very necessary in order to nurture that plant to grow and to bloom and to flourish. And so the thriving piece isn't all, you know, everything is just, you know, rainbows and unicorns and it tastes like strawberries. It's about honoring all of what happens, all of what goes into the your celebration. Because if you've ever noticed somebody who has worked really hard for something or that has gone through some stuff, you know, has really gone through some stuff to get to where they are, and when they finally do get recognized, you can't think of anything else but to thank God and your mama. because those were like the unconditional pillars of strength, you know, for a lot of us. And so, you know, it means so much because you know what it took to get there, you know, and it's like if you could just imagine, I'm using a lot of feminine analogies because I've been in the kitchen with babies and kitchen and stuff, right? So if you could just imagine you're cooking up this stew, and in the Dominican Republic, we have a stew called sancocho. It is delicious. Lynn, the next time that you and I get together, we have to go to a Dominican restaurant, and then you have to taste sancocho. It's gonna be so good. I'm gonna have to keep away from you so you don't slap me because it's
Okay.
So in sancocho, you start out with a base, but then you put all kinds of vegetables, root vegetables in there, and all kinds of meat. There's like 7 meats that go into a sancocho, and just vegetables and root. Oh, it's just so awesome. But the thing is, and it's that, like this with our Thrive journey as well, that we like to just put the pretty stuff in there. You know, the colorful. They just put the carrots in it. Well, you need some onions too. The onions maybe smell bad, maybe give you bad breath, but you need that for the, you know, the flavor and the heartiness of the stew. And so we do the same thing with our own journey. You know, we just put the pretty stuff in there, and we have this Facebook personality and all this great and all these beautiful filtered Instagram pictures. But, you know, your doubts and your fears and the way that you stopped yourself and the ways that you doubt and are uncertain and have to stretch. And you are constantly choosing an orientation. What I mean by choosing an orientation is, this may be a duh for a lot of people, but for some people it may just be the slap of the face that you need, kind of like the reminder of the wake-up call, is that for as long as you are alive and as long as you're going to be in business, you are going to be uncomfortable. Just surrender yourself to that. That's just what's going to happen. The only choice that you have is, am I going to be uncomfortable because I'm stuck, kind of like stewing in my own juices of mediocrity? Or am I going to be uncomfortable because I'm stretching and I'm going for my dreams and it's uncertain and it's unfamiliar and I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but I'm going for it anyway, and that's uncomfortable? Just pick your uncomfortable, you know? And all you're ever doing is just managing your orientation. Am I going to my mediocrity or am I going to my greatness? Am I going towards the familiar or am I going towards profitability? And so the Thrive methodology is about taking, and I actually, there's like nine steps, 3 phases, and I take people, my private clients, through those 3 phases of establishing your foundation, you know, and getting clear on who you are, who you serve, how you serve them. Yeah, and we've talked about this before, the 7 domains of business mastery. But the foundation piece is really laying down, getting those things clear, and establishing what your strategy is and how you're going to get there. Sometimes you're just pulling that out of your butt, because sometimes you don't have a baseline, you don't know what you're doing, you've never done this before, you don't know people who've done it before, etc. And I'll get into some of the ways, the 4 pillars of long-lasting transformation. One of them is about getting that guidance. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But getting that strategy and that foundation set up, and then managing the funnel. You know, there's information that you're putting out, and there's information that's coming in. There's service and value that you're putting out, and service and value that you need to be put in. There's a reciprocal, cyclical nature in running business, just like in life. If you look at how we're set up, you cannot take your next breath unless you let go of the one you've got right now.
Yes.
Like physically, anatomically, biologically, impossible to take the next step, to take the next breath unless you let go of the one you've got. And it's the same thing with your business. There's got to be some things that you leave behind so that you can take on the next stage, you know. So I'll tell you those 7 domains of business mastery so that people start getting an idea of what is it that I need to look at. How do I know that I'm on track? And I can kind of understand I'm more of a startup business, or maybe I'm more of a scaffolding business, or no, I'm pretty much in pinnacle yet, you know. So once you know what your phase of business growth is, now I want you to audit yourself on these 7 domains of business mastery. And those 7 domains correspond to the chakras of your physical body. So just like you have a root chakra that is supremely concerned, and I will say exclusively concerned with your survival. That's why the tribal consciousness is so important, because back in the day, that is the way you survived, is by sticking to your tribe. So just like you have that survival root chakra, you have the money domain of business mastery. And people start with vision, and they start with, oh, well, what's your vision? What do you want? And what's your dream? I don't start there. Because when your survival is at stake, you can't even think of a dream. You can't even think of vision. You have to get the survival needs met. Like Abraham Maslow has that hierarchy of needs. You have to get your need to survive met first, so that there's even room for you to think about a vision. You're not big enough to think about a vision yet. You have to think about, how am I paying my bills and making sure that the business continues to survive and it has its operating expenses met. So that means for somebody that's in the startup phase, you have to have proof of concept. Does this business actually make money? You might need to tweak some things. Maybe you need to increase your prices. Maybe you need to up-level your offer for more people. For some people, you make a lot of money because there's high-ticket items. For others, it's because it's volume, right? Like Amazon's whole business model is about volume, right? So in the same way, the second chakra, the sacral chakra, which is where our sexual organs are, it's where we reproduce. It's our creativity, but more like on a physical level, like create children, as opposed to like create ideas, right? Mm-hmm. So in that sacral chakra, you have managing your systems. So you've mastered money, and now you need to manage your systems and structures. And these are the things that allow you to reproduce yourself, so that you can duplicate yourself and you can delegate, and now you don't have to invent the same thing over and over again and reinvent the wheel. Now you have a way that this actually duplicates itself, that your business duplicates itself, right? Mm-hmm. And then the third chakra, the solar plexus, is your willpower. It's where you manage your metrics. How do you know that you are on the right track? How do you know that you're making progress? How do you know that this is working? Right? So you manage your metrics, and depending on your business, and I always talk about this on a one-to-one conversation with my clients because it's too much to get into in just a class. But depending on your business and your stage and your personality and your priorities, your financials, etc., you may have different metrics, right? So you always have to test which ones are your key performance indicators, your KPIs. Then the fourth chakra, the heart chakra, this is where you master your messaging. Like, what am I here to give to the world? What am I here to contribute to the world? What's my, you have your truth, your story, and then you have your torch. Like, this is how I'm lighting up the world. This is the contribution that I'm leaving behind. And that's your messaging. And it informs your branding, it informs your colors, it informs your copy, it informs what products you put out, it informs, the general tone, the tinge of your brand and what you're speaking about. And it also tells you what to say yes to or no to, right? Like, if you're a family-friendly brand, then your article is not going to show up on Playboy. It's going to show up on Family Circle or something, right? So it's not a morality play. It's just getting clear on what your brand is, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, because I know there's a lot of people who read Playboy for their articles. I'm not downing those people, right? So then you have the fifth chakra, the throat chakra, which is about marketing. This is about, okay, now that you got clear on your message and your torch and what you're here to do, how do you get the word out? How do you communicate that value? How do you make sure that that communication lands where it needs to land? Like, who needs to hear that, right? So that's your marketing plan. And then the sixth chakra, your third eye, is your innovation. How do you keep growing? Madonna and Beyonce are artists that are in the general mainstream that are constantly putting out new stuff and reinventing themselves, right? In fact, Madonna could sometimes, for some people, depending on your generation, that's amazing. And then for other people, it's like a joke. It's like, oh, come on, you're almost 60, sit down, But this is why somebody like her is so iconic, because she continues to reinvent herself, and she's had such a long career that not a lot of people, no matter how talented you are, can boast. And it's because she uses innovation in her favor. So that's the innovation piece, the sixth chakra. And then the seventh chakra, the crown chakra, the seventh domain of business mastery is your contribution. It's how you mentor. It's how you pay yourself forward. It's how what wake are you leaving behind from your business? And that means your reputation. It means the impact that you make. Not so much about the money that you're making, but how are your customers' lives better because you were in it? Forget about you for a second. Forget about your bank account and your lifestyle, your freedom-based lifestyle. Just hang that out for a second and just think about, how are you contributing to making other people's lives, relationships, bodies, money better because you were in it, right? That's your contribution. And so you take those 4 phases and you take those 7 domains and you audit yourself. How am I doing on the money piece? How am I doing on the messaging? And you can self-correct. You know, you may not necessarily have the guidance yet. We're going to talk about those 4 pillars of transformation. But when you get clear on where you stand, then you get clear on what you need. Now the gaps are easily identifiable, and now you can go for what you need, because choices only come from clarity. If you're not clear, then that's typically why people get stuck and don't make a choice and procrastinate in making decisions, because they're not clear. So you have to get clear first so you can make good choices. So those 4 pillars of transformation that I'm going to give you. This is how you're going to transform your business. I just taught a class called, and I'll give this to your audience as well. I just taught a class called Launch Your Revenue Revolution. And so I'll tell people how to get there in a minute.
Say it one more time. Say it one more time.
The class that I taught was Launch Your Revenue Revolution. And it's part of the teaching that I was doing with Unlock Your Inner CEO. Anyway, so there are 4 pillars that you need in order to really, really make a lasting change in your business. Number 1, you need to do an environmental audit. Check your physical environment. You know, is it cluttered? Is it dirty? Is it nasty? Is it uninspiring? Do you need to move some stuff? Sometimes just moving the furniture around is enough to like create a shift. You know, it doesn't have to be like, you don't need to go out and do extreme makeovers on HGTV. You know, you can just move the couch. Sometimes that's enough, right? So the environmental audit is your physical and your mental and emotional environment as well. Like, what are you thinking? What are you saying? What are your thoughts like? What are you feeding your mind? What TV shows are you watching? What radio shows are you listening to? What are your conversations like with people? And when you get clear on those things, then you know, sometimes you go on a diet and the first thing that the personal trainer tells you to do is to write down what you're eating and your exercises, how much water you're drinking, and when you're taking it, at what time. And sometimes the very act of writing down your ratchetness is enough to interrupt your bad habit. You know, it's like, oh, I do not want to write yet another cheese Danish so this guy can get on my case. I'm just not going to eat it. If I have to write it, I'd rather not eat it, you know. So sometimes the very act of observing yourself and of logging yourself is enough of an interruption. When you start doing this environmental audit and you start noticing, oh man, I complain a lot, or I curse a lot, or I'm always talking about what might go wrong, then you just start checking yourself. You know, it's just an internal shift. It's not a big deal. You know, you don't need to process that. Just you make the correction and you keep it moving, you know. So first one, environmental audit. The second one is external accountability. That's when you tell somebody else that you're going to go to the gym. And that increases your chances of actually showing up by 99%. Because if I tell myself that I'm going to go, chances are I'm not going to get there. But if I know you're waiting for me there, Lynn, then I'll be there 5 minutes ahead of time, right? So external accountability is important. And that's when your mastermind group, a group of peers that are holding your feet to the fire, that are brainstorming with you, that are giving you feedback, that are not letting you off the hook when you're short-selling yourself or short-changing yourself. That's important. And the third one is expert guidance. So you want to connect with a mentor or a coach that's been where you are, or that's been where you are and that is now where you want to be. So my just very practical, you know, motherly advice to people is don't take diet advice from fat folks. Don't take money advice from broke folks. Don't take relationship advice from dysfunctional relationship folks. That's just like a duh, right? So you want to take advice about growing your business from somebody who has grown their business. And not only that, but has destroyed their business and knows how to start it up again. Because a lot of times you've grown your business like in spite of yourself. Like, you know, like the stars were aligned and you had somebody looking over your shoulder and you managed one good, you know, hurrah. But to be able to sustainably create success, that takes strategy, that takes thinking, that takes, you know, experience. So you want a mentor who's been where you are a lot, you know, who has experienced the doubts and the failures and the delays that you might experience, because they'll know how to get through it and reinvent themselves and help you how to do that as well. And then the fourth thing is your effort. Ultimately, you're going to have to get off your duff. You're going to have to do something. You're going to have to make the phone call. You're going to have to put up the website. You're going to have to figure out your CRM. You're going to have to figure out how Aweber works, or get that thing on Fiverr, or, reinvent your SEO, or whatever it is. You're going to have to do it, or at least get it done, right? Like, you don't have to have your hands in it, but you're responsible for making sure that it happens. And that's your effort. And sometimes we go from class to class to class, from conference to conference to conference, from coach to coach to coach, workshop to workshop to workshop, and we have a gazillion binders of all these amazing wisdom and shelf help, but none of the results to show for it. And that's because the effort part has been missing. You actually have to do this stuff. And I'll tell you what happens when you actually do it. Not only do you find out what works and what doesn't work, because a lot of times when people focus on strategies, some of the stuff might work, some of the stuff might not work. But when you master principles, strategies can come and go, and you will know how to make money and how to be successful and how to create a life that fulfills you every single time. And it won't throw you. Failure won't throw you. Delays won't throw you. And then what happens is you get a certain level of confidence. You get a certain level of certainty about you. And it's like, you know what? It doesn't even matter if it's cloudy outside. It doesn't even matter if the tide is high. I know how to swim. It doesn't even matter if it's like thundering and lightning. I know how to work with the rainy weather. I know how to work with a hurricane. I know how to work with it. It doesn't just have to be sunny in order for me to be okay. And that's part of thriving. If you can only shine when it's shining outside, then you're just a reaction to an environment. You're not a creator, and you're not a contributor. But if you know how to generate your own sunshine, you know how to generate your own growth, you know how to generate your own progress, independent of external circumstances, because you know how to match the environment with the accountability, with the guidance and your own effort, man, you're in the money. You're unstoppable. And that's what the Thrive methodology is about. When I can equip somebody to how to use those, what those are for them, and how to use those, then it's like, okay, we don't need to coach forever because you already have the tools. Now you just have to create results.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Oh, my goodness. It does. It makes more than enough sense. And coupling that with understanding your story. Mm-hmm. And understanding where you are in your story, how attached you are, and how you can utilize your story in all of this process then comes into play. And I have to tell you that I guess was about 6-7 months ago when I first heard the story leverage training. Mm-hmm. Totally turned things around for me. Because while there were certain parts of my story that I wanted to be detached from, it was kind of like you don't know what you don't know, because didn't know that I didn't have to be attached to them, at least not emotionally.
That's right.
And so even where all of this plays out in the Thrive philosophy, give me the one thing that you teach that connects the two, that really brings it home.
Well, it all hinges on one little word. It's not a little word, it's actually long, but it's important. And that's interpretation. That's what makes or breaks our lives, because it is out of our interpretation of our stories that we make our biographies. It's not the fact of it, right? Because how many people have been abused, or have been sexually molested, or have been abandoned, or have been, or not, I'm not going to say abandoned, let's just say they haven't had a primary parental figure, and then they interpret that as abandonment, right? So it's not like, I'm not saying that an interpretation is a lie. Because a lot of times people get defensive about, well, that's your interpretation. What, are you calling me a liar? Well, no, it's a distinction. It's a distinction of reality. That's all. Because if you can just imagine, right, if you've ever grown up, like I grew up in a household where I'm the oldest of 3. So there's a brother and a sister that I share childhood memories with. And sometimes I'll come up with, oh, do you remember when Daddy said da-da-da-da? And they're like, no, that's not how it happened. It's like, how is this possible? We lived in the same house. We were all there. How is it that I remember it differently? It's because I have a different interpretation, you know? And so one of the exercises that I always give people to do is you take a piece of paper and you just draw 2 lines from top to bottom so that you can create 3 columns. And on the right column, the header for that is interpretation. And on the left column, the header for that is fact. And then you leave the one in the bottom, in the middle, empty. And just think of a specific thing that you have a lot of attachment to. That when you tell the story, you know, you get indignant and you're like telling the story and you're checking for the other person's face to see if they're just as pissed at you because you're telling them some, you know, unfair thing that happened to you and da da da. You know, like you get riled up about it. Just pick one of those stories in your life. And I want you to tell the story just with 4 facts. These are the only 4 things that belong on the fact column. It's what somebody said, or what somebody didn't say, what somebody did, or what somebody didn't do. That's it. And notice that I said what somebody said or didn't say, what somebody did or didn't do. I didn't say how, right? Like I can say, Lynn said to me that I'm a piece of crap. But I'm not telling you anything about her tone of voice. You know, I'm not telling you anything about whether, you know what I mean? So there's a lot that goes in there. All of that is subject to interpretation. That's why sometimes email can be so tricky because you're missing a lot of those nuances of communication. So just write down everything that somebody said or didn't say, do or didn't do. And then tell the story based on how you tell the story. Well, she yelled at me and she made me feel like a piece of crap. Okay. No. Is there any said or didn't say, do or didn't do in that? No. So how did it go from what you put in your fact column to what you put in your interpretation column? What colander, what filter did it have to go through to end up that way? And that filter is typically our own internal dialogue, our own sponsoring thought. You see, when somebody says, if Lynn were to say to me, Monica, I cannot believe you did that. You're such a piece of work. And she says it just like that, with that same gesture, with that same facial expression, but underneath my internal dialogue, my sponsoring thought is, I'm a piece of crap. What she said, I'm a piece of work, is going to sound like I'm a piece of crap to me, because that's my sponsoring thought. So what am I going to do? I'm going to get defensive. I'm going to be like, what do you mean? And what's wrong with what I said? And da-da-da-da, right? But if my underlying thought, my sponsoring thought is, I am great. The universe supports me, and I may not know exactly what it is that I'm doing, but everything always works out for me. Then when Lynn says, man, I can't believe you just did that, you're a piece of work. To me, that sounds like, oh, I must have did something real smart that she wasn't expecting. You know what I mean? Same gestures, same wording, same everything, but it's going through a different filter. So you don't have to change the other person to get a different result. You just have to change your filters. Mm-hmm. And that you have control over. That you have a say about. I don't have a say about what Lynn says or doesn't say to me, what she does or doesn't do to me. But I do have a say on how I filter it. And that's the ultimate power position. That's being Shakespeare. Now you get to write your story and how it went down. You're not Juliette, subject to, listen, Juliette's story ends only one way. I don't care where you begin to read the story. I don't care where you stop. When you get to the end, it's the same end. But when you're Shakespeare, you have 1,000 sonnets available to you. You have 1,000 plays available to you because you're the author. And that's part of what thriving is, that you can take all those raw ingredients of something that happened that left you emotionally scarred or whatever, and when you retell the story, you can tell it from a position of power, of triumph, of I'm still here. And break out Elton John, I'm still standing.
That's just beautiful. I love the way that you drew it all together with one word being the key, interpretation. How have you interpreted whatever has gone on in your story? And then what is that interpretation allowing you to do now or constricting you into doing now? Mm-hmm. And I think that is so key, especially for business owners and women in business. You know, there's been so often that women in business have had multiple things to do, you know, probably as single parents or caregivers of some sort or another. Not that men aren't in that experience as well, but women who have been taught to, you know, put everyone else first really has taken away that authorship opportunity. And so I really want our audience to understand the power of giving yourself permission to be Shakespeare. Know that that power is within your hands, within your heart, within your brain in order to bring about. And just, you know, even sharing with others how liberating that can be for you is a way of really grounding into that, anchoring that in, as we say in NLP. And, you know, going through this process, are there any things, Monica, that you help people to do or kind of bring themselves to so that they can, in fact, anchor into these growth stages? I know we talked about, you know, being able to achieve a certain level of success and then, you know, you're stopped and you end up falling down, you're back on ground level and you're starting all over again. While it is only necessary to learn the lessons so that that drop back to ground zero doesn't happen again, what is it that you help people to understand when they reach that, to be able to go up to the next level and not have to experience that time in the slip, I'll call it?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not afraid of the slip. And there are peaks and valleys just in our general lives, right? That's just the cycle of life. And it's like if you get dropped somewhere in December, it's the middle of winter, and nobody told you what winter's like, and you're expecting flowers and sunshine and warm weather, you're going to be severely disappointed and upset. And so that's the power of knowing cycles. That's the power of knowing what cycle and what stage you're in so that you can prepare for the next one. And so part of the work that I do in terms of working with like women executives and entrepreneur leaders is managing your own mindset. You know, a lot of people talk. My PhD, one of my PhDs is in psychology, and I just find it fascinating that people think that the psychology is a study of the mind, when the word psyche, it comes from the Greek soul, and so psychology isn't so much the study of the mind as it is the study of your own soul's evolution. And your mind is just one of the mechanisms to get there. You have your heart too. You have your intuition. You have a lot of things, stories, right? And so the work that I do with folks is, yes, we have a lot of strategies. And we have a team of people that we can refer to you in terms of getting things done and executing, right? I can refer you to a graphic designer, and this person can help you with the podcast, and this person can help you get some money, and here's a banker that you need to talk to, and here's an investor, and here's an angel capitalist, and da, da, da. And there are people to do certain things. But I can give you all the strategies in the world, all the resources in the world, all the how-to, and the people to talk to. You know, people say it's not what you know, it's who you know. Yeah, I can give you the who you know too. But unless you master that internal psychology, your story, and you approach your story as the author and not the victim of it, the casualty of it, then you'll start, anything that anybody throws at you will end up being victimized, because that's how you're approaching life. When you're approaching life as an author, anything anybody throws at you, you're like, okay, how does this fit my story? How can I use this? You know, you're already approaching everything as, how can I create value out of this? How can I make this useful? You know, and so I have a new book that came out just last week, as a matter of fact.
Congratulations!
Thank you. It's called Unlock Your Inner CEO. And I want to give everybody here a free digital copy of it. If you just go to unlockyourinnerceo.com and you can get it there. And it's about that. It's about, you know, handling those 4 pillars of transformation that I was talking about, and then just being your own self-correcting, you know, leader. Like in order for people to listen to you, they've got to know that at least one person is listening to you, and that's you. So if you don't trust yourself, if you don't believe your own hype, if you don't, you know, trust that you know what you're talking about, what makes you think that your customers will? You know, it'll just be a front. And the whole thing about the imposter syndrome is that there is a part of us that feels like we are living a lie. There's a part of us that feels like we don't deserve what we've got coming. The blessings that are coming are undeserved. Or the breaks or the triumphs are somehow, we're beneath them or something. But when you're the author and you know what went through, like the drafts that you had to go through to get to that play, to get to that masterpiece, to get to that Mr. Holland's opus, by the time that you get the Oscar or the Emmy or the Grammy or the Inc. 500 or whatever, you're like, yes! And you own it completely because it took everything you had to get yourself to that point. And you then own it, and that's the power of acknowledging all the dark spaces as well. Because when you can acknowledge that and you can acknowledge how it has affected you emotionally, then you can triumph over it.
Beautiful, beautiful. I want our audience to know that the link is going to be posted right there in the comments section. Unlockyourinnerceo.com. Go there, claim your copy, your complimentary copy of Dr. Monika's new book. Thank you so much, Dr. Monika. And I want to let our audience know as well, we're going to be doing a short after show, so make sure you hang around. I'll be posting the link in a little bit so that you can come back into the green room and hang out with me and Dr. Monika for a bit. And just know that what the Biz Info Zone is all about and what my bringing guests like the fabulous Dr. Monika to you is for you to get to the place of unstoppable and have that interpretation to be through the filter that shows you as the star of your own show, as Shakespeare writing your story. I remember having a conversation with my friend and mentee, Josie James, earlier today, and she said, I am just so happy with myself. And I thought, I'm just so happy with you too. And, we all really, in order to create that energy that makes us even more attractive to our clients and customers and people who are looking for what it is that you have to help them with. You have to see that there is value in what it is that you're sharing, that there is value in what it is that you bring to the world. There is value in you being here now. I wrote something yesterday, I guess it was, or the other day before yesterday, about someone who really made an impact in my life. And the biggest thing that she did was, at a point in time where I was in the slip, she said to me, how dare you? How dare you even consider pulling back and taking you away from the gifts that you bring to the world? And I would say to our audience the same thing. Don't slip back. And if you do, when you do, like Monika said, recognize, make the adjustment, and start moving forward again. And so as we're winding up here today, Monika, give us some last juicy thoughts around this whole concept of story leverage and thriving in business.
You were talking about falling back into the slip, and I got to tell you that I remember a mentor of mine saying once that questions are the creative acts of intelligence. And so it's the way that I have always shifted myself is by asking powerful questions. So I'll give you some of the questions that I give myself when I'm acting a monkey and believing, all the negative stuff that sometimes our inner critic tends to yell, right? So the first question that I always ask myself is, who's speaking? Because the greatness within you, the divinity within you, the part of you that's connected to higher source, there's a way that part of you speaks that isn't like the way your limited self speaks. So the first thing that is like, who's speaking? Who's on the phone with me right now? Who's giving me this information? The second thing is, what do you get out of being right about it? Sometimes we argue for our own limitations. Yeah, but you don't understand. I really don't have the money. It's like, what do you get out of being right about that? Because you're getting something. People say, well, no, I don't get it. Yeah, you get something because you keep doing it. So just check yourself on that. Just be an impartial self-observer. And then the third thing is, what price am I paying? What price am I paying for saying that I don't have the money? What price am I paying for saying that I don't know what I'm doing? There may be a blessing that's available to me that isn't because of my position. And then the fourth question, just going back to effort, is okay, so what, now what? Now you got clear, now you have a choice. What are you going to do about it? You could shift. You can continue to swim in your own juices of mediocrity. That's enough. But at least you're doing it knowingly. It's hard to be depressed when you know you're making yourself depressed, you know? When you're choosing that. It's hard to like stay down when you know that you're setting yourself up for that. So the so what now what is what gets me out and catalyzes me into producing different results. So I hope that's helpful.
Beautiful. Yes, very helpful. Oh, gosh. 4 questions to shift the slip. Cool.
I like that. Shift the slip.
I like that. Oh, those powerful questions. Oh, well, Dr. Monika, thank you so much for bringing you to us today. Thank you for your gift of your new book. That's amazing. And I know that you're doing something that, you know, anyone who wants to connect with you in order to work a little more closely with you. Again, one of the things that the Biz Info Zone is all about is making sure that those who need connections get connected.
Yeah.
And, you know, my business partner, Cynthia Gardner-O'Neill, and I, with our Heart Ventures, that's our life. You know, we know that there's an abundance of resources, but we also know that in connecting, when you can connect from the heart and the heart and head are connected, those connections really do provide you the divine answers. And I know that you are a divine answer for many. So what is that thing you're doing, and how can people connect with you?
Well, there's a series of webinars that I'm making available to the people who get my free book, because I realize that sometimes people have questions and they're like, okay, tell me more about this, story leverage thing, and how am I going to use this, and how is this relevant and practical in my life? So when you go to unlockyourinnerceo.com and you get that book, you'll get emails about the webinars that are coming up and classes that I'm teaching and all this other stuff. But I want you to get that first, because a lot of times we try to collect a lot of information. It's like, no, just unlock the inner. It won't make a difference if I give you classes and whatever if you're not managing your own psychology first. So yeah, you'll get all of it. Anybody who downloads the book, you'll get all the information about that.
Beautiful. Thank you. UnlockYourInnerCEO.com and download the book, get in the communication stream, and hang out with us here on the Biz Info Zone show, because Dr. Monika, we got this thing going here, and she will be back to share more information and participate in some of the things that we are doing with your Heart Ventures as well. So thanks. And thanks to our audience. I say thank you for joining us today. We're going to open up things so that you can join us behind the scenes in the green room. And Dr. Monika, while I'm posting the link, is there one last thing you want to bring to the forefront and give to our audience as there's no more value than the valuable that you have shared, but is there one more point that you'd like to make for our audience?
Start now. The time for dilly-dallying is like over. If you wanted some time to think it over and have some time to waste, or you should have been born to another century. The time is now.
Oh, beautiful. Well said. And for our audience, I've posted the link. Dr. Monika and I would love for you to join us back in the green room. Click the link. Come on in with us. We're going to close out today's show, and I'm going to say, be the savvy social entrepreneur that you were born to be. And thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Until then, peace and blessings. Bye for now.